Today's podcast is focused on Goal 2 of the National Nanotechnology Initiative's 2021 strategic plan. That goal is to promote commercialization of nanotechnology R&D. I'm Mike Kiley, and I work at the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office supporting efforts to achieve Goal 2. This podcast is one of many activities being conducted around the 20th anniversary of the signing of the 21st Century Nanotechnology R&D Act. We're fortunate today to be joined by Craig Bandas, CEO of Pixelogen out of Baltimore. Pixelogen is a leading manufacturer of tunable, high refractive index nanocrystal formulations that enable next-gen electronics, including extended reality devices, OLED, micro-LED displays, and sensor applications. Part of what we want to talk about here today with Craig is how companies like his interact with the federal government and how it works. Craig, thanks for joining the call today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and Pixelogen?
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. Mike, good to see you again. It's been a little while. We've been working closely with the NNCO for many years. So Pixelogen, we are a leading developer and manufacturer of metal oxide nanocrystals. The key benefit that we have with those products on the market today is providing high refractive index materials that we then formulate around and provide a broad set of products into the market under really three brand names. PixClear, which are our dispersions, which are zirconia and titania based today, but many more coming to market soon. And formulations around PixJet for injectable formulations, mainly for display, and PixNil for nano-imprintable formulations, which is really our primary product going after the extended reality market and the sensor market. My background is I've been involved in and around building technology companies for the past 25 or so years, and me and a bunch of investors got involved to turn Pixelogen around starting in 2009.
If I recall from our previous conversations, one of your key discriminators in your technology is the encapsulation of the nanomaterial. Is that right?
Yeah, so we get this question all the time. What's the key technology we have in the company? Is it how we synthesize the nanoparticles, which can be as small as 2 nanometers up to about 15 nanometers? Is it how we control the surface chemistry and do the capping, which is what you're referring to? Or how do we do it at mass production volume? And the answer is really, it's all of it. The IP wrapper we have, which is both a broad set of patents, filed internationally, as well as a very deep pool of trade secret, is all critical to how the components work. If one of those pieces falls down, the value proposition really ceases to exist. So it's how we've been able to simultaneously deliver all of that. The capping that you're referring to, the surface treatment, is really the step in the process where we determine the application. So for example, the same zirconia nanoparticle that goes into an augmented reality headset to have a wide field of view and a very crisp image in front of you is the same nanoparticle that goes into a next-gen additive that we've been working on with the Department of Energy for many years. And it's the capping on the surface that determines where that application goes. And this is what we talk about when we talk about tunability, the ability to really tune properties in a way that delivers a lot more of what customers want in terms of properties in their final application.
Craig, your company has been awarded multiple SBIRs, Small Business Innovative Research Programs, from DOE, DOD, and the National Science Foundation. What have been your experiences in applying for and executing those awards?
Yeah, so I would say, SBIR has been great, but also we have awards from NIST, which are probably on the early stages for us were the most important award we've gotten so far and really helped take the company to a level of success that I don't think we'd be at today without that. We look at, all of the potential government grants that come out and programs to figure out which ones can support our efforts to commercialize the best. And so for us, it's looking at, how does the initiatives coming out of the grant offices align with our commercialization and revenue goals going forward and product development and introduction goals going forward. And so there's been some great support. The initial goal we had in going after the NIST program, which was under what was called the TIP program, Technology Innovation Program, that one was the first program coming out of the nanotechnology funding world to really support the scalability and manufacturability of a nanoparticle versus the invention of a nanoparticle. And that really is how we established our world-leading manufacturing technology that we now are able to do, in Baltimore, but also could do really any place else in the world. And we're looking at expanding internationally starting next year. I would say the grants out of Department of Energy, mainly around our OLED material technology, have really helped us become, I think, the leading material provider of OLED-related materials around the world for both displays and in lighting. And all of that funding has helped to create a pool of innovation for us, which is what enabled us to go after the augmented and mixed reality market because of that, that technology base. We also raise a lot of money through the equity markets, private equity markets, as well as private debt markets. And having the monikers coming in from the respected agencies that we have is a big part of what I think gives the investor base confidence to invest in us by having gotten through, some very scrutinizing programs and world experts that essentially validate our technology. So I would say, when you combine government funding with leveraging private dollars, they work hand in hand very well.
That's a great explanation. My previous experience with the TIP program is that money is hard to come by. The TIP program was particularly noteworthy for what the companies had to bring to the table in order to get access to that kind of funding. Is that correct?
For sure. So you had to have compelling technology. You had to bring in a commercialization partner who was already, in the markets that you were going after to validate and vouch for your technology and support the commercialization plan. And you had to also match the funding, right? So that program was an $8 million program. The government through NIST put up $4 million, and then Pixelogen had to go raise the other $4 million along with our partner. But having that kind of government dollar leverage enabled us to go raise those funds from the private investor market in a way that, would have been very difficult without. So it was a difficult program. The due diligence on the technical side was intense. It was a very intense competition, but when we won it, it gave everybody a lot of confidence in the direction we were headed.
That's good stuff. Let me shift gears a little bit here and talk about lab to market. The federal government has an active lab to market program aimed at getting the products of federally funded research into the private sector for commercialization. Has Pixelogen licensed technology from a government agency or tried to?
So we haven't to date really licensed from the government. We have some joint IP with some government agencies, mainly around our lubricants program, where the IP that's been filed is really, it's all around how you can use what we call self-assembling nanoparticles that we've invented for this lubricant application as an additive. And so that's a situation where we jointly hold IP with the government, and also there's a university partner there at the University of Pennsylvania. But so far, really all of our technology has been homegrown. And so, we really look to the government as a source of support funding to enable us to bring the technology that we are working on to market as quickly as we can. We have looked at it. We haven't found the right fits for us yet, but we wouldn't hesitate to go down that path and bring in technology if we found the right fit.
If you sat atop the federal R&D enterprise, what would you do to speed commercialization of federally funded research?
It's a really interesting question. I think there are so many great programs that we have through all the government agencies. When you compare to, on the world scale, there really isn't another country that I really believe supports technology in a way that this country does. And I think that is why we are still, the leading innovators in most of the critical fields, and others are trying to be fast followers. I would say ways to improve upon that would be, when you look at, for example, the SBIR program, the way it's broken down into a phase 1 and a phase 2, there's a gap, right? You win phase 1, you have that initial level of funding, which isn't that much, once you start to become a bigger business. And then you have to go through a phase 2, which becomes more meaningful in funding to really help bring product to market. But there's a 3, 4, 5, 6 month gap between those two. If there was a way to almost wrap those two together to say, if you meet the goals of phase 1, you get the phase 2, once you've been able to validate that you've done that, and then you can have more continuity in between the funding and your development programs. I think having larger funding programs also helps that process as you become a larger company to really help bring product to market in a more accelerated and thoughtful fashion. So, for example, getting a $500,000 program is great, but it doesn't really get you a product to market. Winning something in the $4 to $5 million range over a 2 or 3 year period, that really is impactful. So trying to find maybe a little bit more of a balance on doing some larger funded programs for companies that are at later stages to really help accelerate some of the final steps of getting products into the market. I think you would see overall a bigger return on those dollars in terms of products in market and in terms of more employment in critical jobs, in manufacturing and in other high-tech areas, and obviously increasing tax bases. So I think that is one area where we could see more of an impact in some of those programs.
That's great. There's a lot to unpack in what you said. I know the SBA is actively addressing the gap that you stressed between a phase 1 completion and a phase 2 award, because they recognize that your personnel who may be working on that phase 1 may wander off, so to speak, if you have a 5, 6, or 7 month gap between completion of the phase 1 and awarding of the phase 2 contract. So they figure that out, and they're actively working guidance to disseminate that to the agencies who actually execute the program. And I agree with you 100%. The larger programs are the ones that get you into the commercial marketplace. The SBIR and STTR programs they're about innovative research. They're not really about making products, right? They're finding, what works and what doesn't, make some mistakes and get on with it. And I think DOE has really been championing, larger investments, especially in the area of clean technology, batteries, et cetera. So those are good points, and I appreciate your perspective.
And I think when you look at those programs around, batteries, and that's an area that we're starting to explore as well on, some energy storage materials, those are necessarily big bets, right? They're big swings, right? And I think it's important that mindset that you just mentioned that starts with the SBIR and STTR of early stage swings that aren't big swings, but they're to get things started and learn from mistakes. There's still going to be mistakes that'll be made with big swings, with, programs that are in the several $100 million. But I think as a country, we have to be willing to take those because other countries are doing it and they're seeing the effect of what can happen long-term when they do. We have to be more thoughtful on focusing on, on the many, many dozens of years of big technology wins, not the, 1 or 2 that maybe didn't make it along the way.
I appreciate your insight. Shifting gears one more time, in the NNI strategic plan of 2021, a goal was added to address the need for a robust technical workforce in the United States. As a company CEO, what's your opinion of the state of the technical workforce in the U.S.?
Okay, this is a really important question and a little bit of a hot button. I think it's becoming more and more difficult in this field, at least that we're in, which is really on the leading edge of advanced material science, to find qualified people to bring in, and the competition for them is intense. So we lose people to some of the biggest material technology companies in the world and generally technology companies in the world on the West Coast and around the world, and they're hard to replace. So I would say there is, the focus on STEM, which we've been hearing about, for the past 20 years, but really the past 10 is got to continue. We have a very diverse workforce of people from many nationalities, working in the company. But when we have to go find a senior technical resource or even a mid-level, it's very hard. We've got to search the whole country. There's a hefty cost in recruiting and travel and getting people moved in. There's only so many, right out of college or even right out of PhD program levels that we can bring in. We need to have, also some real world experience in some of these roles. I think continuing to push universities and supporting STEM programs from the early ages, and maybe making some of the more difficult to find programs and degrees, maybe giving some preferential treatment to some of those in terms of educational grants or loans. And then finding a way to keep the talent coming in from other parts of the world here so we can put them to work.
In the past 5 years or so, we've seen a lot of emphasis at the community college level of technical workforce. Have you seen any of that in your current role, or is it just not a right fit?
No, it's a great fit. In fact, we're heavily involved with one here in Maryland in Copen State College. Actually, our CTO is on the board of one of their programs to try and help bridge between what the university can do from programs they're developing and what companies like Pixelogen need in terms of new graduates coming out. One of the first key areas was some feedback we gave years ago to the University of Maryland system where there's not enough polymer formulation type of background coming out. There's a specific, chemistry background where they can maybe synthesize a material, but they're not able to really formulate a product. And so trying to get it, from the basic science to the actual productization of science is an important step in that. And so we are playing, as active a role in that as we can. That's the first step in it. And we're looking for other avenues to be a part of that. I recently got involved with Breakthrough Technologies. We have other mentoring type of opportunities that we look for both locally and nationally to try and help support the general technical ecosystem around science and innovation that we think is so critical for future workforce.
Craig, thanks a lot. I'm going to let you go because I know you're a busy guy. And once again, I'd like to thank Craig Banas of Pixeligent for sharing his time. For those looking for more information on Craig or the company, go to pixeligent.com. That's Pixelligent. And for those interested in more information about the National Nanotechnology Initiative, go to nano.gov. Thanks for listening. There'll be more CEO conversations in the future.